So I just want to dive in maybe with you, Tiffany, like what got you looking down that rabbit hole of polyvagal theory? Because it's not something I've heard many other people just happen upon and then bring it into such a worldview as yours.
Well, it's kind of curious because Stephen Porges's theory came out the same year that I was defending my master's thesis. And my master's thesis is on the topic of there being, my theory is that there's a nexus to the body-mind connection, and that there is a physiology to presence and transcendence, and that we can look to the more esoteric physiology that gives us information. And when I learned of Stephen Porges's work on the polyvagal theory, it was from one of my committee members with whom I had to defend my thesis. And it was right before I had to defend, and I gotten into barely a readable article because it was before there was a book published, before there was anything. And I was like, what is this? I know it's important, but what is this and how does it relate? So my thesis dealt with this little known chakra called the alta major that just happens to line up at the branch where the vagus nerve, which is the 10th cranial nerve, that branches out of the brainstem and diversely moves its way. The 10th, the vagus for Latin means the wanderer. So it's the nerve that connects all of our, maybe not all of, but a majority of our organs in our body. So respiration, our rest and digest, it's very important to our entire nervous system, parasympathetic and sympathetic. Then that was matched with the reticular activating system and this little known chakra called the alta major, the reticular activating system, and the vagus nerve. So that's where the sort of rabbit hole that I was on for about 5 years at graduate seminary. I studied with Norm Shealy and Carolyn Mace. And Norm said, if you don't know his work, he was a Harvard trained, or he actually taught at Harvard. He was a neuroscientist and neurosurgeon. And he said, Tiffany, you're crazy for taking this on, but it's really important. So it was this mix of, and I always saw a spiritual connection. And of course, with anything with the alta major chakra, which is not really talked about in many cosmologies, and it's known as the mouth of God in several of them. And in Yogananda's work, he spoke to it with where the kriyas are really emanating, where you're making a connection through the breath work at the medulla. And there's many more details, layers that we could go into here. But when I read Porges's work, I was like, oh my God, please don't tell me that I have to defend this on top of what I'm already trying to put together. And luckily I didn't have to, because his theory was way too new at the time. And since then, now I absolutely see this layering effect of how relevant they are. Stephen Porges as a scientist really isn't so keen on having the spiritual conversation, and said, you have it. So that's kind of what happened actually in a conversation that Paul and I had with Stephen Porges a couple of years ago.
Well, that was in the Boulderado Hotel before Tiff was going to go on the next episode of Open Minds. So we chatted with Stephen about his theories and how it might relate to some of Tiff's spiritual interests.
Wow. So was Stephen also being interviewed? Was he another guest?
No, we were on the phone with him.
Oh, okay.
At our hotel.
I would love for the audience to better understand just so my understanding of the polyvagal theory is that there isn't just the sympathetic and parasympathetic system. It's not just a binary when one is on, the other is off, and vice versa, but that there's almost a ladder effect. And the third of, at least the other part, there's sympathetic, parasympathetic, and then also the social nervous system. Is that help me understand the way that connects with our facial expressions as well? Do you understand those connections?
Well, I understand it from what I've read of Porges's, but also what I intuitively put together is also related to the ears. And remember that the vagus is branching everywhere. So you've got afferent and efferent, which means up and down fibers. And much of the medical literature, by the way, isn't just saying only the sympathetic is on the right side of the body and only the parasympathetic is the left side of the body, which is how it has been thought of before. And what Stephen Porges is introducing with the social is that a third branch, and that has to do with the myelinated and the demyelinated vagus in its properties. And it's demyelinated from the diaphragm up and myelinated from the diaphragm down. Well, when we are listening to voices or receiving information through our eyes, by the way, it's been written in Norse Transtender's book. I think I'm butchering his name. I apologize. And others. I think Bruce Lipton have also done some of this science of measuring the amount of inputs. So it's said to have that just our eyes have 10 million bits of information per second being processed. Well, only about 40 bits per second can actually cognitively be processed per second. So where's all that other information going? And that our nervous system is digesting it in some ways. So you can think about that as our relationship to our inner world, to our outer world. And that's also how it connects to our social activities, how it is that we engage. Are we fully present? What's the tone of your voice? Are you making eye contact? Do your facial changes actually change based on what it is that you might be emoting? And that's part of that social system. So I don't know that I would explain it in the same way that Stephen Porges explains it, but that's the way I see it working in alignment with also biofield.
Make sure you all head over to benjosephstewart.com, become a member. You'll have access to the growing library of deeper dives where I talk about all the stuff that I really can't talk about on YouTube. Make sure you get involved in the Discord chat. That's where a lot of the conversation is happening, talking about new theories, being able to interweave into the greater conversation that is how we awaken infinity. That's our highest potential. And I just want to remind you, you are the most powerful technology ever known to creation. Wield it like an artist with a conscience.